Welcome to the tip channel. That is perfection. I wanted to talk to you about product. Now, your finish on your cabinet is only going to be as good as the product that you're using. Through the years, the industry's used a lot of different products. Way back, there was varnishes and shellacs. I've been in the industry for about 40 years now, so I've had ladies come to me and say, Dawn, I got something sticky around my handles. Do you sell something to clean cabinets? And I have to explain to them what you're actually seeing is the finish around the hardware is deteriorating because of the oil in your fingertips. That was one big disadvantage of the older products that the industry used. If they try to clean that off, they're taking their finish right off their cabinet. Next up, the industry went into lacquers. Now, lacquers are great. They dry quick, and they work well for areas like tables and chairs and end tables and places like that. The problem with using lacquers in a kitchen is that you have a lot of moisture in a kitchen. Naturally, above the stove, all the steam, down below the sink, naturally, doors get dripped on, what have you. Around the dishwasher, a lot of steam. So what happens with lacquers is that moisture will creep underneath of the finishes. And what you end up with is you end up with a sort of foggy look underneath of the finish. So that was a bad mistake that the industry went into. This product I've been using now for about the past 20 years. And it is made by M.L.Campbell. Now, it is one of the best in the industry. I'll throw up a chart where they actually take and test foods that are going to be in a kitchen, chemicals that are going to be in a kitchen, and then they're rated accordingly. I'll throw that up on the screen. Now, beyond that, M.L.Campbell's product meets or exceeds AWI specifications for Class 5 conversion varnish. Now, what does that mean? AWI is American Woodwork Institute. They are the big boys that write manuals that are about 1.5 inches thick of codes that you have to follow in order to meet certain criteria. Architects will use those codes. They'll say your cabinet needs to meet or exceed section blah, blah, blah of AWI standards. So when you can meet or exceed a standard with AWI, you're one of the best in the industry. But let's talk about what they are and how they're applied, things like that. First of all, you will start out with a sealer. Now, M.L.Campbell just came out with this about a year or so ago. And basically, it is a crystal high build. Now, I use crystal. They have a lot of different lines. Crystal means crystal clear, meaning it's water clear whenever you put it on. There are products that they add a little bit of tint to called Duravar, which sort of levels everything out a little bit. I don't like using it. I love wood. I like to see those variances in color. That is the beauty of the real wood. But I use crystal, and this is called a high build sealer. Wow, what a difference. Sealers in the past, the grain would always raise. So in between your sealer and your top coats, you did a lot of scuffing. I mean, hard scuffing in order to get all the raised grain down. I don't know what they changed in their chemical makeup, but sanding is so much easier now between coats. So real big plus for the industry. Now, in regards to finishes, they'll start out with a matte, then they will go to the satin, and satin's normally what I shoot. They actually have a semi-gloss, which I've never used, and they have a gloss. Now, with the kitchen industry, typically you start with satin. Satin is about a 35% sheen, and the reason we stop there is once you go shinier, things start to look like plastic. Now, you don't want to expend the cost of doing real wood cabinets and make them look like plastic. So typically we stop at satin, which is about a 35% sheen. Now, painting is very big in the industry nowadays, and typically with a painted cabinet, you put on a 15% sheen, which is the doll. Also painted with glazes, again, a 15% sheen. So it's a duller sheen on the paints. And typically, like I said, about a satin in regards to the real woods. Now, they also offer a claw locks. Claw locks is a primer for painting, which works very well as well. Now, all of this is post-catalyzed. What does that mean? Basically, whenever you get ready to add this product, you add a catalyst. The catalyst in regards to the ratio is 10%. So if you're mixing up a quart, which is 32 ounces, you would put 3.2 ounces of the catalyst into the product. What does the catalyst do? The catalyst makes the product dry very quickly and very, very hard. So keeping in mind that in a shop, the longer air time that you have, the more time you have for dust and what have you to settle into the finish. So drying time is important, hardness is important. So that's what the catalyst does. Now, about 50% of my shop is below grade, so I always keep dehumidifiers running. I like about a 55% humidity in the shop, and I like the temperature to be somewhere around 70 to 75 degrees. Now, there's going to be times where it might be hot during the summer, you got the air running, and you're still running close to 80 degrees in your shop. Or it might be in the winter time, and you've got the heat on, and you're very, very dry. Now, the problem with spraying at that time is that naturally things are drying too fast. So they do make a retarder. Now, the retarder, you can put up to about 10% retarder in. And what it does is just slows the drying process so it doesn't dry too quickly. Today we're going to take a look at finishes on cabinets. Now, a finish on a cabinet is not just the finisher. A lot of the finish on the cabinet is the person prepping the material to get finished. Everybody hates sanding, but it's a job you got to do. Now, first of all, orbital sander, okay? An orbital sander, what it does is as it's spinning, it's also oscillating. And what I'm talking about, it goes whoop, 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 whoop. What does that do? That keeps from putting swirl marks in your finish. Now, let the tool do the job. Do not press on the sander. All you're simply doing is guiding it over the surface. Now, this is plywood, and I doubt whether you will actually even be able to pick up on that. But basically, the veneer core that you're talking about could be measured in 1/100ths of an inch. So when you get the plywood from your distributor, it's going to be in pretty good shape. What you're really doing is that from in the warehouse, the grain is going to be raised. So what you're doing is smoothing that out. Now, in regards to sanding, let me explain that your fingers can feel a whole lot more than what your eyes can see. So naturally, you're wanting to sand it smooth, and your fingertips can feel that. So after you're done sanding, run your hands over it. If you feel a rough spot, you still need to hit it a little bit. But be careful you don't get carried away on plywoods, because you can go right through that top layer of veneer. We covered sanding plywood. And one thing that I did fail to mention is I sand plywood with 150. Now, in my shop, after I go through my planer, my hardwoods, I have a drum sander set at 220. And then naturally, I sand everything with 150. Now, I stop at that point. The reason being is that if you go to a lumber yard and you feel the cabinet, it feels like sandpaper. The person probably stopped at 120. They didn't do a great job at preparing the cabinets. It's high production, so you get what you pay for. In regards to the sandpaper, I stop at 150 for one reason. Once you go above 150, what happens is you start to polish the wood. The problem with polishing the wood is then it no longer wants to take the stain. So you have a problem trying to keep everything consistent once you go above 150 on sandpaper. Now, stiles and rails on a cabinet. I sand before I put them together, but you also have to sand after you put them together. Reason being is that you're wiping off the excess glue as you're putting it together. That's raising the grain, so that needs to be sanded again. Also, if you have any glue at all left on the frame, that area is not going to accept stain. So after your frames are done, sand them once again. Now, do be a little careful as you're sanding your frames. Try to keep your sander as flat as possible. The reason being is you don't want to round that corner off. If you have two cabinets that are coming together, like I said, they won't match up nicely if you've got that corner rounded off slightly. We covered sanding plywoods and sanding flat hardwoods. So what do you do whenever you get to moldings, whether it be quarter round, whether it be crown moldings? How do you sand something like this? Well, this is what you use. This is called a sanding mop. I believe that's the name of it. I'll double check. Now, manufacturer looks like I am Chan. I don't know. Everything comes from China nowadays. But basically what a sanding mop is, you can see these are all flexible. And this one is actually a 160 grit sandpaper on this. And these flex to go down into the moldings. So they make special tools that you can use. Personally, I just grabbed a Husky, and it's called a 1/4 inch die grinder. And actually these tighten up right into it. Now, this is an air tool. The nice thing about it being an air tool is you can adjust the speed with your air pressure to how fast you want to sand product. Now, it is a little nasty. I will tell you that. I suggest either using a face shield, use a set of goggles or something, because like I said, it is sort of a nasty process. We're going to start to show you how to apply stain. Now, whatever you're doing, I ask you, please stop. Give me 2 minutes of your undivided attention. When you're working with oil-based stains, you're working with polyurethanes, you're working with lacquers, these rags will self-combust. They call it spontaneous combustion. What happens is that they dry very slowly. As they start to dry, they produce heat. They will actually catch fire. So what I do in my shop is I've got an empty 5-gallon bucket. I put my rags in it and put my lid on top of it. If it does catch on fire, it's going to starve of oxygen and go back out again. So an old paint can, put them into an old paint can, seal the lid up on it so that that's not going to be an issue, or take them outside somewhere where if they do catch on fire, again, it won't be an issue. But this will kill you. Now, let's talk about staining, something a little more fun. Okay, first of all, take your air hose, blow your table off. Number 2, blow all your product off. Get all that sawdust off your product. Final thing, tack rag. Hit everything with a tack rag. You want that to be as clean as possible before you start applying your stain. Now, a few tips on staining. If you're planning on using different woods on your project, say for instance that your cabinets are going to be cherry and you want to do pine trim and you want that to match. If you use the same stain on 2 different wood species, you're going to have 2 different colors. Now, a little bit of a tip, if you're doing some pine trim, pine's a softwood, so it's going to suck that stain up like a sponge. So one tip you can do is take your stain and you add minerals to spirits to it. I mean, naturally, if it's an oil-based stain, you would use the mineral spirits. What that does is thin it down, and you can actually keep playing to the point where you can actually put it on pine. It'll look very close to your cherry or your oak or what have you. If what you're doing is not dark enough. Now, it is nice to have a control sample. In my case, I have a cabinet door of the color that we're going to go for. So as I'm applying my stain, I'll compare it to this to make sure I've got a nice constant stain match. Second thing, Naturally, old clothes, for me, it's a must. I'm a slob. But anyways, gloves. You want to look at the nitrate. I buy these at Harbor Freight, relatively inexpensive. Well, they were relatively inexpensive before pandemic. But anyways, if you use the cheaper gloves, the problem is that some of these chemicals will actually eat right through the gloves. So they don't do you any good. But good gloves. Second thing, invest into a couple bucks for these. They're practically nothing. Now, they snap right into the inner ring of your can. And naturally keeps all the stain and gunk from getting in to your sealing area. So whenever you're done, if you don't have all that gunk in there, then naturally you can get a good seal. That stain will last a long time if you keep it airtight. Now, don't work out of your can. Take your stain. Number one, has to be mixed up well because all the goodies are down in the bottom. Then you want to take and pour some into a cup, and now you're actually ready to start staining. This way you're not cross-contaminating your product. If you get a little bit of sawdust or something in this, you toss this at the end. Don't put it back into your product. But these little goofies, they'll work on gallon cans, they'll work on quart cans. Now, one other tip. Let's just say, for instance, you're trying to match something that's on pine, and you just can't get this oak to get anywhere near as dark as what that pine is. You can actually take a wet rag and hit this oak first. What that does is it raises the grain. Because you've raised the grain, it will accept more of the stain. So it'll make this piece darker. Now, naturally, you can leave the stain on a little longer. That will make it darker. You can also take and stain it twice. There is a process called toning, but that gets a little involving. I won't go there. But to apply the stain, basically, once you really get that nick, once you actually get the knack of staining, you can actually take and spread the stain around without even having to wipe it off. Before then, go ahead and put your stain on. Now, these are lint-free rags, just like a t-shirt, if you will. You don't want to use anything that might have some color in it. You don't want to use something that might have a lot of lint. Those two things are naturally a no-no. Now, once you have your stain spread out, now as you can see, I am a slob. Then you take a clean rag and you wipe it off. And we'll compare that to our color sample, and we can see we've got a perfect match. Not a problem. This is ready to clear coat. Now, what you want to do is you want the stain to at least dry a couple of hours before you shoot your clear. Now, personally, I like to actually let it dry overnight, especially with woods like cherry. They seem to, for some reason, take a little longer for the stain to dry. But we'll go ahead and get all this trim sprayed up, all these plywood skins, and then our next step will take you to the spray booth and actually show you how to shoot clear. We have 6 rolling tables, 3 foot by 6 foot, ready with product to go through the spray booth this morning. Now, my shop is small, so I keep 6 rolling tables. I'll roll 2 of them into the spray booth, spray them, roll them out, roll the next 2 in, rinse and repeat. This way we can get a large volume of product through the spray booth. A few different things. My spray booth is called an open face spray booth. I wish my shop was 10 times bigger and I could have a huge spray booth, but sometimes you work with what you have. This works just great for me. I've shot a ton of product in here and not had any issues. Now, a couple different things if you're just setting up your shop. Explosion-proof lights, gotta have. Ventilation, you have to have ventilation with this product. Number 3, use a respirator. Now, before we get started, I'm going to share something with you. I had a gentleman work for me. His name was Ron. Sort of a different character, but Ron was one of the best finishers I ever met. Now, I would have a client bring a stain sample into me and say, Don, we don't see anything in your line of this color, and we really like this. Can you match this color? So I would take it back to Ron, and I would say, Ron, I have a client out there who wants this color. Can you match this? He said, sure, yeah, no problem. That looks like about a teaspoon of red. He said probably 3 drops of yellow. And I would say probably a 1/4 teaspoon of blue. And I'm like, no, Ron, this is stain. This is not paint. He said, no. He said, let me show you. He would go over to his mixing area. He'd dump some mineral spirits into a container. He would put a teaspoon of red in, a couple drops of yellow, a 1/4 teaspoon of blue, stir it up, put it on the board, and sure enough, there was the color. Now, I'm not that finisher, but with this product, I've laid down a ton of clear coat with amazing results. You will be amazed at how easy this product just flows. Now we're at the mixing area, and let me explain that the M.L.Campbell product has what's referred to as a pot life. Basically, that means that after you add the catalyst to it, you have X amount of hours to work with before the product becomes garbage and you dump out anything that's left. Now, I normally go by, if I mix up in the morning, if I'm not through with it at the end of the day, it gets tossed. But mixing a quart at a time, you won't have that problem. Now, M.L.Campbell actually does make mixing cups. You can go to your normal paint store, if you will. Right now, I've got 26 ounces of product in this quart cup. And I like the little thing that M.L.Campbell sells. It's about a 6-ouncer, only because I can read the scale a little easier for the amount of catalyst. So, 26 ounces of product, 2.6 ounces of catalyst. Now, if you forget the catalyst, strip your product down and start all over again because it will not dry. So, catalyst in, we'll mix this up and naturally go into our spray gun. I will be using a conventional spray gun to spray everything. If you watch any of my videos, you know I'm old school. Now we've reached the fun part of the process. What am I talking about? We went through all that irritating sanding, staining, and at this point what happens is that wood comes alive. What I'm talking about is naturally as you put the stain on, that wood grain starts to appear, but whenever you shoot that clear, wow, everything comes alive. And you'll see what I mean in just a few minutes. When I spray, basically what I look at doing is I stay about 8 to 10 inches above the product. My first line, I will actually shoot past my product. My second pass, I'll overlap my first by half, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So you're always overlapping about half of your last. You don't want an area that ends up with overspray, so you want to keep everything sort of wet, if you will. But a couple little tips. I normally spray in the normal direction with my tip whenever I'm doing everything flat. I do try to do everything flat. Definitely helps. Edges of my frame, naturally I will take my tip and turn it on 90 degrees and move very quickly across the edges of my frame. And then once I have my edges done, I'll come back and shoot the top of my frame. Our sealer's been drying, and now we're about 45 minutes later. Now, the sealer will dry a little quicker than that. My top coats dry in about 45 minutes, so I normally just use that window as reference. It's easier for me to remember. Speaking of remembering, I went to the doctor the other day, and the doctor said, "How you doing, Dawn?" I said, I'm doing okay, Doc, but I've been thinking a lot about the hereafter." And the doc looked at me and says, "Oh, Don," he says, "you're still young. You ain't got to worry about the hereafter yet." I said, "No, Doc, you don't understand. I keep walking into the other room, standing there wondering, what am I here after?" I know, I'm no Archie Bunker. All right, so basically what is scuff sanding? All of that work that you went to get everything all silky smooth. If you run your hand across it now, you're going to see that it feels very, very rough. So what's happened is that grain has raised. Also, you may have little fine dust particles that you can't actually see, but you can feel them. Again, your hand can feel more than your eyes can see. So what we want to do is scuff sand at this point, and we're not after to try to sand that finish off. We're looking for smoothness. So what we're doing is, as we're scuff sanding, we're filling at the same time. We're going back for that nice, silky, smooth feel. Now, these are sanding sponges, and I buy them from Sherwin-Williams. These are fine, and this is just a square block, which works great for flat stuff. And then they make a sanding sponge that's flexible, that works great for moldings. Now, when it comes to moldings and things like that, the thing you want to be careful is don't get too carried away on the edges, because you can actually burn through the finish and have bare wood showing. All right, we have everything scuff sanded. We're back to being nice and smooth. And as you can see, basically that creates sort of a white dust. We'll blow that off and hit it with the tack rag. And then we'll be ready to start shooting our top coats. Top coats, we'll be doing 2 top coats on top of this. We're looking for about a 5 mil thickness. There are little gauges that you can use to see how thick you're actually applying product. We completed our sealer coat and our 2 top coats. Everything is now dry. And with the M.L.Campbell product, the one nice thing about it is how quickly it dries at this point to what's referred to as stacking. What that means is you'll be able to take your moldings, put them all together, put some shrink wrap around them, and take them out to the job site. You're looking at about 4 to 8 hours. Typically, I let mine set overnight, and then naturally it's not a problem in regards to stacking. So what does that mean? It means at that point it gets very, very scratch resistant, so that you won't have any problem in bundling things up and stacking them. Now, what I was trying to explain about the wood coming alive whenever you put the clear coat on, and this is what I'm talking about. Look at that grain pop. I mean, at that point, everything comes to life. Everything starts to make sense. Now, real wood. Are you going to have different colors? Absolutely. Different pieces of wood are going to take stain differently. Plywoods are going to take stain differently. So you are going to see minor variances in color. You're also going to see minor variances in wood grain throughout an entire kitchen. That is the beauty of real wood. If you have a customer that doesn't like that, sell them plastic laminate. Plastic laminate, they take one sheet of wood, they take a photostat copy of it. If they run off 1,000 sheets, it's going to be exactly that color, exactly that sheet throughout the entire order. I had a client once say, "Dawn, I don't like the grain in this door." I looked at her and said, "I didn't build the tree. You'll have to talk to God about that." Needless to say, I did get her a new door. I mean, the customer is always right. I wanted to take a minute, though, to explain about some different wood species so that you might be able to steer a client into an end result that they're very happy with. Now, the staining and what have you that we've done is oak. Now, oak is very, very dynamic on grain pattern. A lot of twists, a lot of twirls. A lot of customers love oak. Some people don't like all that dynamics. Next up, maple. Maple has a very, very soft, subtle wood grain to maple. Now, maple looks fantastic in the lighter shades of stain. What starts to happen with maple is that it doesn't like taking stain. It's a very tightly grained wood. So it ends up looking very blotchy, especially where you get cross grains and what have you. The stain will suck into that location and it won't in others. So it looks very blotchiness. Now, some manufacturers will take maple and do what's called a toning process. Now, Toning is where instead of staining a product, they take and mix the color in the top coat and then they spray it. I absolutely hate tone finishes. You're covering up the beauty of the wood. So don't like tones. Maple's beautiful, very, very soft and subtle. Looks great in lighter shades of stain. Cherry. Most people think of cherry as being that deep, dark burgundy color, cordovan, if you will. But cherry, even in its natural state, is a beautiful wood. If you're looking at a client that's going to go into darker colors and they want that soft, subtle wood grain, cherry is your choice. It's very, very uniform in regards to color. And like I said, it's very, very soft and subtle in regards to the graining. Now, another wood species, which I don't have a piece right here to show you, I will flash a kitchen picture of it, is hickory. Now, hickory is a wood you either love or you hate. Personally, I love it because in one piece of wood, it'll go from dark right into light. That's a characteristic of hickory. It's very, very dynamic. I love hickory in its natural state because of all of that dynamics, if you will. Again, it's a wood that you love or it's a wood that you hate. So take the time to talk to your client about the different wood species, the advantages and disadvantages of both. Make sure that the end result is going to be one that they're going to be happy with. Last part of finishing. Got to clean up the gun. Now I know you're looking at my gun thinking he hasn't cleaned this thing in years. Actually, I clean it after every use. Outside doesn't matter. What does matter is the inside of the gun. So first of all, what we'll do, we want to get rid of the old product. And I have what's called a muck bucket. Everybody needs a muck bucket. I'll put about a 1/2 inch of lacquer down inside of it, lacquer thinner. Just roll it around and get rid of that. Now I'm going to put about 1.5 inches of lacquer down in it. I'm going to take and spray a little bit through the gun. Now, next thing I'll do is clean off the rim. Very, very important. Clean the rim. That's our sealing area. And then we have a gasket. We want to clean that area. Want to check our air hole, make sure it's not plugged. Then, the last little tip. Take your nozzles off. Throw them down into your lacquer. Close the gun up and you're ready for your next application. Very last tip. Don't forget about the stain rags, the lacquer rags. Take them outside or put them in a sealed container. We don't want a fire. Most important part of finishing. Now, that concludes our finishing process. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it informative. If you have any questions, please leave a question in the comment section. I'll get to you just as soon as I possibly can. This is the Tip Channel. Everything today turned out. That is perfection. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. Thank you much and have a great day.